Well, the rain's come in the bush. It's the 18th of November today, and only in the last 2 weeks, so from about the 12th, 10th of November, it's started to rain. Now, that 2-week period has transformed this place into a beautiful, growing, green paradise. Now, I'll tell you what, when I drive through the Kruger, particularly after the rain has come and it's so green and lush, I'm constantly reminded that this Kruger National Park is a protected space. It's not a place for us to come and interfere, or it shouldn't be a place for us to come and interfere. And although we are, just simply by being here, there's a base of ethics that one needs to constantly keep in mind when you're driving in a place like this. One of the questions I keep getting is, why can't you drive off-road to go and have a closer look at an animal, particularly if it's a high-profile animal like a lion or something? And there are reasons why you can't drive off-road. I mean, you know, many people see safari programs, wildlife programs in Africa, where the vehicles, the game drive vehicles, etc., are driving off-road to go and have close looks at animals, etc. But this is a national park, and what that means, the Kruger is a national park, and literally what that means is it is one of the few places that South Africans are allowed to come and enjoy being out in the wild with this diversity in their own vehicles. They can drive around in their own vehicles. 1.3 million people come through the Kruger on an annual basis. That's how successful this national park is. The majority of those 1.3 million people are South African, and they come in their own vehicles and they enjoy some time in the bush. So you get, I don't know, an average of 200,000 vehicles coming through on an annual basis in the Kruger. And if those 200,000 vehicles were allowed to drive off-road in the Kruger, they would make an impact, a very serious impact on the environment, and particularly in times like this when, you know, it's wet underfoot and soft underfoot. You had a vehicle driving off into the bush 200,000 times a year, you would have 200,000 sets of vehicle tracks that would make an impact on the surface. You know, they would displace some of the soil. They would make marks, and those marks on displacement and perhaps those little dents in the bush would eventually become little furroways or furrows for the rain and the water to run down and wash away some of the soil. And eventually when that started happening, you would start leaching that soil, and the goodness and the nutrients out of that soil would wash away to different areas, and you would get the beginnings of erosion. And once you start getting the beginnings of erosion, that erosion will start to spread and spread. Could you imagine 200,000 sets of these little indentations in the bush, in the Kruger? It would take a couple of years before you would start seeing a marked change in the environment. And really what would happen is, because only the hardiest plants will survive in leached areas or drainage areas that are poor drainage areas, and you'd find that 1 or 2 species of plants would dominate, and eventually that dominant plant would take over the diversity here. And you know, behind me and out here, I can see 6 or 7 different species of trees and probably about 9 different species of grass just here. You'd eventually only have 1 dominant species of grass, perhaps, or tree, And because of that, you're limiting the resources for the animals, and so the animals that normally you would find here would start moving off, and you would have one dominant species of animal, maybe, you know, one mammal, one kind of reptile, one predator, one etc. That's just me painting a scenario. And that's the reason you don't drive off the road in a national park. In a private game reserve, it's perhaps different, because there aren't any public vehicles driving around, and so the amount of vehicles driving around are less, and the impact less severe. But personally, I don't like it, because I believe that we shouldn't be allowed to hound animals. We shouldn't be allowed to go after the great sighting and get as close as we can to a high-profile animal. It should be, we should try and as much as possible be included in this environment and have as little impact as possible. I see the young impalas, rams, are sparring already, getting ready for the new season, and that's what they're going to spend their time doing now as they grow up, is they're going to try and test strength and dominance and see who's the guy at the end of the day who's going to get the job of making the new generation of impalas. Talking about driving off-road, one of the things about having a national park where people cannot drive off the road is that the animals have become, over the last 100 years or so, have become used to the fact that vehicles don't pose a threat outside of being, you know, the road. So the animals are, their comfort zones change. They become habituated to the fact that vehicles are not going to go driving off after the road, and they tend to hang around next to the road or even on the road. Which doesn't happen often in private game reserves. You find that the animals will move off very quickly and move away because they realize that the vehicle may follow them into the bush. So one of the benefits of not driving off the roads is the fact that the animals seem to have an understanding, or they've managed over the years to interpret the fact that vehicles are not going to pose a threat to them.